Okay, I think we're just missing Seth. I'm sure he'll join shortly. Why don't we respect everybody's time and get started? I will call this special meeting, the Operations Planning Committee to order for Tuesday, October 22nd at 4 p.m. Thank you for joining. I'll start off with a couple of quick things. One is that we're about to start, or in some ways have already started, the budget process for the fiscal year beginning next July 1st. I know the Board of Education is a preliminary look at their budget. Board of Selectmen is just getting started on our end, although the one thing we are going to undertake is a pretty comprehensive review of health insurance options for the town hall side of things, and take a look and see what we might avail ourselves of with a continuing kind of eye towards controlling costs. So we're going to be spending time on that, since it's been not just a big cost driver, but a big cost increase driver for our budgets in the past. Maybe Jim, when you talk, you could address the issue of Board of Finance guidance for the budget process here, and what process this year, and what you guys would like to see. Next topic for me is that Jim and I, along with Jennifer, have discussed a capital spending analysis update. So Jim is on top of that as well, and we're going to spend some time over the next few weeks to try to finish that analysis and also get something that's presentation friendly for the public to consume, to get a sense of where we are both today as well as prospectively going forward. And I'd kind of like to do it over the next, I was thinking over the next 10 years, but I guess I'd define it to say over whatever time frame would include any renovation work that we might need for the high school and for Middlesex, but just so we've got kind of a directional sense of when and where and how much that would cost. So Jill, we'll be coming back to you for some review of those projects and some ballpark estimates as to what that might entail, both in terms of quantum and timing, just so we have that complete view. In addition, I've had a lot of questions lately about the impact on student enrollment of the new developments here in town. I know they were minimal for Darien Commons, but it would be interesting just to be plugged into your process, where I know you have a fresh estimate of student body growth over the coming periods, and just kind of to be on top of that. I know there's a number of folks in the public that are interested in where that's trending and whether those developments will affect that. We had the noise abatement study public hearing a couple of weeks ago. You'll recall that this is about the train noise on the New Canaan line. So that hearing, I think, went well. The consultants that we hired did a good job. Next step is to discuss funding for that. It's going to cost quite a bit of money if we don't get a waiver for what's called a constant warning time signal, which would be required for a noise abatement, but which we currently don't have on the New Canaan line. A noise abatement project could cost in excess of $20 million. So I told the group that I would entertain discussions about that with the other two affected towns, which are New Canaan and Stamford. I've got a meeting in New Canaan with the first selectman there on Thursday, and this will be one of the topics, but I'll report back to this group once those conversations have taken place. Two other quick points. So there have been some phone outages today. So town hall's phones were out. The 911 service was out. It appears to have been restored. The preliminary report suggests that it was a cut fiber cable somewhere in Texas. Hard to believe that a cut for a fiber would cause such a widespread outage, and I'm a little disturbed that we are that vulnerable to such a thing. But this is all preliminary. I'm sure we'll get more information later, but it looks like 911 service as well as town hall phones have been restored. So that's that. And then lastly, I had a flash email from Demis Region 1. Demis is the Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. They've issued a fire warning for tomorrow from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. We've had a lot of gorgeous weather, but it has been extraordinarily dry since the storms in August, which has really raised the fire risk in this area. So just a message to everybody listening to take extra care with anything that might cause or result in a fire. So we're in dry times, and paying attention to that is pretty important. So I will end my comments there. Does anybody have any questions? Okay,
I think the quiet zone over where I live, hearing the trains is not a problem at all.
Well, if you
I
live
can
right
tell
next
you
to
the
the
first
freeways,
horns crossing in Glenbrook go off at about 6:30 in the morning, and you know you can hear them going all the way up through Springdale, Talmadge Hill.
yeah. Well, interestingly, one of the reasons that the complaints have become stronger about this is that the new trains that we've all now transitioned to have much crisper and louder horns than the old dumpy trains we used to have. And so what's happened is people bought their houses in those areas and then, wait a minute, these train horns are now a lot louder than they were before. And we didn't sign up for that. We signed up for the slightly quieter horns. And so one of the things is we're about to issue a letter to our federal delegation in Washington, because this is a Federal Railroad Administration issue, to see if we get clear about what their specific rules are with regard to decibels, a floor for decibels, as well as the length of the sounding of a horn, because there's been some complaints that maybe these guys are laying on the horn too much. They're not automated. So maybe that will provide some relief, but the longer term project is obviously less certain given the cost involved. So,
Hey, John, are you able to speed the trains up as well?
well, I'm not sure you want to go too much faster on the New Canaan line,
Yeah.
but it is quite amazing. The trains, certainly into New York City, are probably 10 or 11 minutes slower just from Neurontin Heights when I started 20 years ago than they are today. It's really quite remarkable. And in the 70s, we had fast trains and supersonic commercial air travel, and 50 years later, we have neither. So things are not always getting better.
John, one thing to note with regard to the train when they blow the horns, there's a regulated distance from the station where they blow the horn. I think it's a half mile. So
Yeah.
if you live a half mile from the platform, you're in the horn blowing zone.
Correct. I forget the exact distance. There's all kinds of rules about distance, number of blasts, length of the blasts, decibel levels, all of that stuff. And we're trying to make sure as a first step to ensure that the train horns soundings are not any louder or longer than they need to be. There's a suspicion that that's the case, and that might be an easier fix than trying to eliminate train horns altogether.
Because the brokers that sell the houses, they will not tell you that you're a half mile from a train station and it blows right outside your window. But it's true.
Yep. It's a problem. Okay, Steve, you're up.
Fantastic. Thank you. We're working on a couple different things. So I'll give you some stuff that's tangential at the first term. Right now, we have town council reviewing P&Z potential fining system. Historically, P&Z has never fined anybody for doing something wrong with regard to an application, whether they went across the border or their erosion control stuff was out of place. You have seen times where you can get fined like $100 a day or $10 a day or something like that until you rectify it. P&Z, a statewide issue was, I think they've never really done that. We've only probably wanted to do it in our town once or twice in my career on the commission, but that's something that would probably end up going. I think it's in conjunction with the blight laws, but eventually, if it did get passed by P&Z or enacted in a way, shape, or form, it's going to go in front of the RTM because they approve all that stuff. At our last week's meeting, we did approve a proposed car wash at exit 13 on the Post Road. It's the old Bartucci site. They're going to be moving. Right now, there's, I think, 2 exits in and out of that old Bartucci site. They're going to close one of the exits, move another exit to line up with another street. And at one point in time, they did propose to put a traffic light at that intersection, which is I think it's Old Norwalk Road, I think is what it is. Maybe I got it wrong, but there's a street there that we wanted to put a traffic light in there. The state never approved it. They redesigned it a little bit, but they got approvals from us They got approval from us last week. So in about a month or so, you might see some demo going on that property. At our last meeting, we also interviewed a third person that's going to put in a bid to do the town plan of conservation and development, which is due mid 2026. We're going to meet on the three proposals that we had, and our next meeting, not tonight, we're going to meet on October 29th to pick one of the consultants that put forth a proposal. Just as a note, we do not pick the lowest bidder on this. There is a cost involved with this. It's in the six-figure number. It's over $100,000, but we don't, when we're picking a consultant to do this town plan, which is really important. It's not based upon price. It's based upon quality and reputation and their historical work. And just as a note, for probably most of you people know, sorry, all that money's already been budgeted in advance, so it's not a new budget item for 2024. Tonight, there's going to be another public hearing on a proposed project at the Nielsen's Thorndale Circle office complex site. The proposal on that, just so people know for the general public, is there's 5 office buildings that the Nielsen's have put on the market for sale. Within that park, I think there's a total of 7. The proposal is to raise those 5 office buildings and put up 5 apartment buildings. It's about 11 acres. The proposal that is out there that's in public record is 175 dwelling units, of which 14 will be affordable. The density, just for rough numbers, is less than 16 units per acre, which is a big number for Darien. It's more than Avalon. Avalon, I think, is about 10. It's a lot less dense. It's less dense than 2 or the 3 other big projects we have in town. But if you may recall, and you may not recall, the state of Connecticut, in one of their legislative packages, they want to mandate that we allowed 30 units per acre in any area that was designated as TOD. We wrote testimony against that proposal. That was a statewide handed down mandate years ago. 30 units an acre that's way too dense, and some project like this is not even remotely close to being that dense. What else? I think that's the major highlights that we have. There's not much. I looked inside my old notes. That's pretty much it. So any questions for me? I'm here.
Any restaurant openings or new business openings coming up in the next, say, before year end?
Yeah, I don't have that at the top of my head. There's usually it's a little bit of a flurry before Halloween. I think most people have really opened. I do know there's a couple boutique type shops that want to open up inside Norotan Heights over at the Federal Project. But I don't have the dates of them. I was told they were going to be open by Christmas. One's a woman's athletic wear shop. That's a local small proprietor that's going to do that. The big announcement that did come out with regards to new tenancies is Roan, which is like kind of sort of Lululemon for men. They're going to open up in Corbin District. That the guy who runs that is a local operator. It's a big company. And I think it's Dave Checkitz. I'm pretty sure it's his son. Dave Checkitz used to be the GM for the New York Rangers. And he got into the sports where their headquarters is here in Stanford. And they're going to open up another location in Darien. So that's the one that's the biggest that I know about. There are probably 3 spaces that are available inside Federal. In the Darien Commons project. I don't have any really update leasing on that. With regards to some of the tenancies that's at what's still called the Palmer site, which is also known as Darien Crossing, they've got the 2 restaurants that they're going to put in. They have a bunch of other activities for tenants in there. We're going to meet with those guys again tomorrow to make sure that their tenancy that they're proposing in there is already pre-approved. Most of the uses, such as quick service restaurants and personal service. When we do these resolutions and approvals, they kind of get approved in advance and based upon percentages. So if you have, you're allowed to have 25% restaurant, 25% personal service, 25%, regular retail space. And then, another 25% something. So we don't want it all one mix. You don't want all restaurant. You don't want all personal service, and you don't want all, it's actually hard to get all retail, but that all affects the parking and the timing of the parking. That's why that gets regulated. So if they want to switch it, which David Genovese has switched it a couple of times and Federal switched it a couple of times, we want to know that in advance so it doesn't really affect our parking and whatnot. But to answer your question, I off the top of my head, I can't think of any that are opening, but I'm sure you will be at some of those ribbon cuttings. I tend to see you a lot at ribbon cuttings.
Selfishly filling up my calendar. So
There you go.
any other questions for Steve? Okay.
The town plan of development.
Conservation and development. It's conservation and development, not both.
Town plan of conservation and development. Thank you for that. The only thing I've heard is emphasis on capacity. What's the capacity of the town to absorb more people, more apartments, more?
Yeah, that's gonna be it. I brought that up on all three interviews. It's a capacity. We're trying to get a paragraph or a section in the town plan for capacity, and it's three things. It's one is school systems, which is the easy one. The other is fire department. The other is police department. The other one's EMS. And then the third big one is traffic. The one thing that you also have in there, filtered in there, is water and sewer and utilities.
Right.
The water problem or the sewer problem, sewer really doesn't get regulated because there is a section in the state zoning code where you're allowed to put in your own private sewer system, which we don't really want in our town. And I think I mentioned this once or twice before. Sewer is not really an issue. It's an issue, but it's not an issue in Greenwich, and it's really North Greenwich, and then the upper part of New Canaan. They're building like 5-bedroom. They're building like 7-bedroom houses and 8-bedroom houses with 5 bathrooms on a septic system. That's kind of how it gets approved. I don't know, but it's really not an excuse because you could build a 5-bedroom, or 5-unit apartment building just as easily as you can build a 7-bedroom house in North Greenwich on the septic system. But to your point, Seth, yes, that we've asked all the consultants to make sure that they work that into their proposal, their documents, and if they originally said that their fee was going to be, for round figures, $100,000, we have to add another section, then maybe it goes to 110, something like that.
Well, if we're pumping into Stamford and Stamford's building housing, well, you can see it easily. You just drive down I-95. The question of capacity is right there, I think.
Yeah, it is. And we don't control our own sewer system, to your point. I think I might have mentioned this once before. Wilton has the same problem. Their sewer system is controlled by Norwalk. And when Norwalk expanded their sewer system, they did not give any more capacity to Wilton. So Sanford could build a new sewer system and increase their capacity for their own self. They don't, to my knowledge, they don't have to give it to us either. So you don't control your own destiny on that. But it is a constraint to develop
Our own development. Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. But, yep, it's on the table. It's on the radar screen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Jill.
Hey, yes, John, not a lot to report here on our side, but I will kick it off. Over the last 2 meetings, we've welcomed 2 new members. When David Martin passed, the DTC nominated or recommended, and we voted on Malin Gasarud, who joined us 2 meetings ago. And then on our past meeting last week, we brought Jenny Schwartz on to fill the vacancy created by John Wolcott. So in terms of the work that our board is doing right now, you're kind of coming off a little bit of the summer lull and getting ready for the budget season, making sure some of our new members are all up to speed and working with Jen to pull together some, initial views at what we think this year's budget season could end up looking like in terms of how much cash we'd have available in the general fund, any major movements in the grand list, large capital projects that we have coming up, new bonding and so forth, all to try to get ourselves armed for being able to take your budget and the Board of Ed budget and sort of integrate them into the final budget and tax setup.
We're always glad from the RTM to contribute to the capabilities of the Board of Finance.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim? Great. Jill.
I actually have some positive news to start with. I'd like to thank all of the volunteer staff and students who made this homecoming weekend so very special for our community. The soccer and football games were exciting, and they were presided over by the beautiful flag suspended on one of our fire trucks. And then Saturday night was our first homecoming dance in something like 15 years. 768 tickets were sold to the dance. That's more than half of our school population, and it's really exciting. We heard great reports, and certainly it looked like fun, up to and including a blow-up mechanical bull. And so I'd love to thank the homecoming co-chairs, Sarah Hesley and Kathy Lokers, and then DHSPA co-chairs Kelly Scallon and Beth Lane, and the many, many parents, staff who helped chaperone, and all the students who showed up and had fun. The other fun thing I have to report is that about 2 weeks ago was Construction Appreciation Week at each of the 3 elementary schools, Henley, Holmes, and Royal. The principals organized it. The kids made cards, and depending on the school, in some cases they covered the trailers with cards. In other cases, the construction workers came in the morning and their offices were filled with them. And they were lovely. I've seen a number of them. Most of what the students had to say was thank you, but there were some funny comments. Anything from unlimited time to finish the project to offering to help with lowering the construction noise and giving some training there. And it was a great opportunity to help humanize the construction workers for the kids a little bit, and to get kids feeling excited about the project. Shortly thereafter, we also had some beam lowering ceremonies at each of the schools. So there's a lot to celebrate on both those counts right now. Not quite on the same scale of celebration, but I am happy to say that our forecast is up to $2,000 in surplus for fiscal year 25, which is better than a $60,000 deficit, which is where we were last month. As John mentioned, we are looking at the operational drivers going into fiscal year 26. The board will be discussing it as a whole tonight as part of an ongoing discussion over the next couple of weeks. We are at that time also looking at our updated 5-year capital plan. So that'll be ready for you, John and Jim at all. And of course, it doesn't include everything you might want to know about, for example, things that we're planning for the middle school, but it's a start. Also coming up in the beginning of November will be our updated enrollment. John, you mentioned some discussion about the impact of the developments on our current enrollment. Our last projection last year called for about 112 students spread over all 3 stages, elementary, middle, and high, for the developments that exist so far. We, the board, are keeping an eye out for additional developments, such as the one at Thorndale Circle, or potential developments that Steve mentioned earlier. And we appreciate the continued cooperation from town staff, planning and zoning et al. And while there's certainly a lot more going on, that's about all I have to report on today. Thank you.
Okay. Just one comment from me on the capital spending, just getting some kind of directional sense of timing. And I know amount's hard to think about, but I would like to have just something to put on our radar scope with regard to certainly Middlesex and even the high school. Something's going to happen there in the next 10 years because that building will be, in 10 years, will be 30 years old, hard to believe. But we can talk about that offline, but I would like to just start the discussion about
Sure.
what can we say about that preliminarily.
Preliminarily, what you can say is that we are, one of the fiscal year 26 budget items that we have is a master plan study again of the our facilities, focusing particularly on the middle school, Tokenique, and the high school. Depending on what we decide is necessary for the middle school, it's probable that work on that would begin sometime not too long after work completes on Hinley Homes and Royal. We're not staffed to handle another building project, you know.
Nobody's staffed to do that.
So we aren't, yeah. It will lag in time, but it should be not too long after HHR for the purposes of forecasting.
Okay, just don't have any capital spending for Ox Ridge. I may burst into flames, so.
Yeah.
Hey, John, can I ask one question relative to that a little bit?
Sure.
The site behind it, which is the old senior center site, that was supposed to have a bunch of work done on it and flattening, because that's adjacent to the middle school. Is there anything going on with that?
So I had been out there and this was a potential candidate for a pickleball court, to be honest. And I don't know where the Parks and Rec is on all that. Lori may be able to address some of that when she gives her remarks. I don't know of any other plans to do anything with that property at this moment.
Because we approved Ed Gentile's filling in of the site, because it was I think some of the foundation was still there or remnants were there. I think it was taking dirt from the Rutten Heights train station where they were digging something up there and putting it over there. I just never know what happened.
Yeah, I'd heard about that too. I don't have an update. I will ask.
Okay.
John, is that still town-owned property, or Lori, is that part of the Parks and Rec portfolio?
I think
It is not part of Parks and Rec. We have no control over that parcel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think somebody plays soccer on the back. I think Darien Soccer plays back there.
Yeah, there is a field that's up north of where that parcel of land is that we're talking about.
Right.
There's a separate parcel that's not used for that.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure if it's one parcel or two. I was under the belief that part of it is Board of Ed and part of it is town, but I'm not even sure that's right.
I'll get clarity on that. Okay.
But it's definitely not Parks and Rec. We have nothing to do with that parcel.
Okay.
You got to press the cut.
Okay, thank you. Lori, go ahead.
Okay, update on some of the projects we talked about at the last meeting. In terms of our ARPA funded projects, everything is complete except one, which is the Baker Park Playground renovation. We were successfully awarded a bit extra money, which will allow us to install matting that goes over the engineered wood chips. Well, technically, engineered wood chips are considered ADA compliant. They're not terrific. So this will allow to put matting over key areas to make the playground much, much more accessible to individuals with varying abilities, both children and their caregivers. And additionally, and probably more importantly, to complete a sidewalk from the parking lot to the playground, which currently doesn't exist and was actually necessary in order for us to do this project. So with the additional funding, which we're very appreciative of, it allowed the committee to keep the various play features that they had hoped to include and do these projects rather. I was just talking to me, excuse me, and not cut back some of the play equipment, which would have been the alternative. So we expect to be ordering that equipment very shortly to get that project going, and whether it gets done over the winter depends on if the ground's frozen, et cetera, et cetera. But if not, we'd expect to do it in the early spring.
There's not a sidewalk from the driveway entrance to that parking lot down the road that goes to the entrance that's right in front of that fence? Or are you talking about a separate?
I'm talking from the parking lot in Baker to the playground.
Okay, yeah, inside, I guess you would need one, but.
Right, because you want people to come and park and then be able to walk down on a fixed surface, which now you're just traversing over the grass.
Okay.
So that definitely had to be corrected as part of the project. Also, we were awarded a little bit of extra money, which was a nice surprise, to replace the backstop at Holohan Field, which we had requested for this year's budget, but what was cut out and had been put, as a placeholder for next year's budget, but that will allow us to replace and repair that and have that ready for the baseball season next spring. So that's fairly easy. We can get that ordered and get that installed in time for the season. Baseball is wrapping up about now, so we'll have that ready for next season. So that will complete probably by the spring at latest our use of the ARPA funds, but everything should be ready and encumbered within the necessary deadlines. Other capital projects, we met with the Board of Selectmen last night and we're hoping to progress Weed Beach, but doesn't appear that there's an appetite for that spend at the moment. I know this capital plan was referenced, capital planning was referenced, so I'll have to have more conversations about John about how we might proceed on that. We also discussed Pear Tree a little bit. Dan Biggs, our consultant from Weston and Sampson, expects to have a documentation for the P&Z approvals needed to get the bid documents going to the staff. Steve, he thought within a week to absolute outside, but he's aiming for within another week. He mentioned that staff wanted to meet with him to go through it. So then the question will be, he was under the impression it would be a 2 to 3 month approval process. Although I know you had mentioned at the last, oh, I love the surprise on your face. You had mentioned that town projects sometimes get fast tracked. So to the extent that that could happen, that would be helpful because then we, can go to bid sooner and know the number sooner, which ties into budget planning, capital planning, and the other projects. So,
Are you going to be ready on October 29th?
No, that's next week. I don't think so. He said within a week, but the staff wanted to go through first. So
Okay.
I don't think so. You mean to be on your agenda?
Well, the thing that makes me nervous, we only have like 45 days left in the year,
No.
right? Because we don't meet in December. And
Right.
you get Halloween, Thanksgiving, and then then we're kind of sort of ended. So,
Oh, okay. You don't, because I remember last year you did meet in December.
we'll meet in December for a special meeting if need be. And,
Mhm.
and you guys are special, so we could create a special meeting, but
Okay.
I'd like to make sure we tell people that in advance.
Okay.
But,
All right.
I mean,
Well, as I
that's
said,
it.
I spoke to
You
Dan
definitely
last
get
night.
through the top of this.
He thought he'd have the material in within a week. So, I know he's
Okay.
trying to get at it. And I know that certainly the selectmen pressed him a little bit last night to
Yeah, those
try
are
to,
complicated bid documents, but it would be great to start to get clarity as to what that project's going to cost.
what that project's going to look like. I mean, practically speaking, we probably wouldn't want to do the construction until the fall because it will involve closing the entire park down. And to lose that for the summer season, especially when people are using it as parking at Great Island, poses some challenges. So there's going to be a lot to think about, but the sooner we can get everything we need buttoned up, the better. So.
Okay.
Because just
Except
to
for
finish up and then I'll stop.
do you have any other big capital spending on the immediate horizon for parks?
No.
Okay.
No.
Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Hey, John and Lori, on some of these capital projects, I think, just in terms of building into a bigger analysis, I think we not only do we need the quantity, but for some of the near term stuff, I think it's going to be helpful to know when we think the project would start, like specific dates, just so we can begin to manage, the amount of money we're using on the general fund versus bonding and kind of all of that, because, sort of with 2 bridges, couple beaches and a few schools going on, I think that'll become, with some of the new rating agency analyses, increasingly important to kind of get that timing down.
Yeah, the commission will be going on its annual parks tour this Saturday morning, starting at Cherry Lawn at 9 o'clock. And we use that process to walk through the parks with our parks director and our staff park supervisor, help us identify, maintenance concerns for the year upcoming, and, think about capital projects and some, but, given that we're all out in the parks quite a bit, I mean, the 2 projects I mentioned are really the big ones that have been lurking out there to complete, and then we would feel like we were in pretty good shape. But we'll be doing that, and then that ties in with the first presentation from our parks director regard to this coming budget. We should be seeing her first cut at it at the November meeting. We've not had anything from her yet.
Okay.
So that all kind of ties together.
To
It
answer your
seems to me
question,
that there should be some dialogue with Great Island. Because Great Island is another resource for overall for the town. I realize it's not a park, but it's a resource and quite a large one. And how the beaches and some of the parks and what the capabilities there are fit in with the thinking of we've got another consultant looking at what should we do with Great Island. And I would think you would need to be dialoguing with them so they know what's going on. I would, looking at it from the Great Island standpoint, I wouldn't want them to get sort of into their own silo and not understand the other parts of what's going on in Darien and what the other resources are, for two reasons. One is we don't want to double up on capability with Great Island, and also you want to look at the whole picture, because there could be holes that you want Great Island to fill, and you can't do that unless you have an overall picture of what the resources are in the town, and then how Great Island fits in, and how your plans fit with what they're doing.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, Seth. I know that as Reed Hildebrand began their work, one of the key resource documents that they referenced that they would be reviewing very carefully is the Parks and Rec Master Plan, which was completed in early 2018. So they do have that document and they reviewed it. And I believe that was probably the thinking in having me serve on the Great Island Committee to create that connectivity. With the two large capital projects that we have, in various stages of process, the one comment I would make is that those are both primarily beach restoration projects. A big component of them is creating sand dunes, resiliency, raising the parking lot from flooding, mitigating wetlands, things of those nature that, to a large extent, are somewhat what I would call infrastructure projects of our existing beaches. And one thing Great Island really doesn't offer is a beach. I know for all of you who've been out there that the little bit of beach, while it's adorable, is quite small and currently would not, as I understand it, meet the requirements to be designated as a swimming area by the health department. A key one of those is you have to have restrooms. And as I understand it, a porta potty doesn't count as a restroom. In Connecticut, they want places where people can wash their hands and have it be more sanitary because people are bathing together. And I am just speculating here, but I would think in terms of getting those kind of facilities down to that beach area, we probably are a bit of time off. So yes, absolutely, we have to complement the whole thing, but part of that recognizing what Great Island offers to the community and what it won't, and balancing all of that out. So it's definitely going to be the trick.
Yeah, I went to the morning session at Great Island, and where the consultants were there, and spoke to the lady who's running it, and I said the same thing I said to you. I said, I'd like to introduce you to Lori Bora.
Yeah.
By the way, before you get too far down the highway, remember that there's a whole bunch of resources out there, and the two should fit together. It's more efficient that way, but also it makes sure that the needs of the town are best met.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and really looking at the master plan and seeing if there's unique, features to Great Island that we want for land. One thing, I know a lot of the gardeners want is they would love to have more community gardens, because there's always a waiting list, and we don't have a great spot in our existing parks, but one could envision that possibly that's something that could be added to Great Island fairly easily. So those types of things that might be met elsewhere, absolutely. Otherwise, okay, so talked about capital. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of events, the last large community event scheduled for the year is the Old Fashioned Holiday, which is on December 7th at Tilly Pond Park. Last year that was, for a few years now, but last year we had a beautiful kind of one of these weirdly warm days, and it was extraordinarily well attended. I think number in the thousands probably. John, I know you were there for part of the time.
Crazy.
It was great. It was really busy. Some of the features from last year will come back, you know, the lanterns that float in the pond,
Do you know what
Yeah.
time it is?
a time. I think it's kind of all afternoon.
Okay, all right.
But they're also adding to it this year with food trucks and different stores and vendors in town will be able to have sort of a holiday market where people can do some shopping, you know, crafts, maybe jewelry, things of that nature. So it'll be coming back effectively, you know, bigger and better than last year. But the kids had a ball last year. I spent the afternoon there handing out the lanterns, and
Yeah.
it was great.
Okay.
It was great.
Any questions for Lori?
Just one thing I want, if I may note, Lori, it basically takes 3 meetings to get something approved by P and Z.
Okay.
The meetings can be back to back, like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And if need be, we could always truncate it into 2 meetings where you deliberate and you approve the resolution on the second night. So
Okay.
if you're working backwards and you want to get it in before December 6th, so you can get your budgets out. And I mean, it seems you need our approval to be able to get the numbers for these guys and the bid for those guys. So we're not
Yeah,
going
but then we have to go out to bid, and that
Right,
takes what, a month at least, 6 weeks for the bid period.
Yeah, I just don't want to have P and Z add 3 months to your process. That's
Okay.
not acceptable.
All righty. So I'll just circle back with Dan, but you said the next meeting is October 29th. If the staff wants to review, it doesn't sound like he'll be ready because that's next Friday, week from
It's a
Friday,
week
but
from
I'll
today.
check with him.
Yeah.
And you would need that stuff, what, 2 days in advance? More?
You kind of sort of have to have a week in advance.
Week in advance. Okay. That doesn't sound likely to me based on what he told me last evening. Okay, but thank you.
You get the month of
Um,
November to do it.
Yep. And I think that is it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Lori? And finally, Seth, go, sir.
Well, we met last night, the RTM. We added 2 FTEs in sort of like a reorganization of the police department and maintenance. And we don't really like to add positions in the middle of the budget cycle because it's, you know, the total amount was 89,000, but it's only for 6 months and the people aren't going to leave. So what you really wind up approving is 175,000, which is what the true cost is for the 2 folks going forward. So we would much prefer to have these kinds of positions added in as part of the budget process so we get a true picture of, you know, what the costs are. And that came up in the discussion, and I just pass it along. We did an update on Great Island, and that just continues. Mark Adeletta is our representative from the RTM in the Great Island Committee, and so his information was really interesting. We put it on the agenda of the RTM at each meeting because it's a big project, and we approved a lot of money for it. So it's good to have everybody in the RTM listen to what's going on and be updated. We have the next item was really to appoint a Republican member of the RTM to the Blight Commission. The RTM is not is apolitical, but the Blight Commission is subject to minority representation. So we're searching around to find a Republican member of the RTM to be on the Blight Commission, and we haven't found them yet, but it's on our mind to get done. We transferred Oxford School back to the Darien Board of Education for maintenance and care, custody, and control, which I think they were already doing anyway, but it's something that it's something that has to be done just from what I'll call an accounting standpoint. And we approved an acceptance of a van donation from At Home in Darien to the town, which is great. I've used At Home in Darien for transportation, and it is a great institution and really functions well and was very helpful to me. So that's sort of what's going on. We don't meet again until after the election, the annual meeting, and that's a time when we reorganize. We elect new chairs of the districts. We elect new members to the Rules Committee, and then the Rules Committee meets after that to assign people to committees in the RTM, and then the committees meet and they elect their representatives. So there's this period before the State of the Town meeting on December 9th when we sort of get ourselves reconfigured and get ready to do the work for the coming year. So that's about it. I've given you my comments on Great Island and the town plan.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is, you'll recall from the Board of Selectmen meeting last night that based on the recommendation of the Great Island Advisory Committee, we approved dog access, not to start immediately, but for the committee to decide a date for that access to start. But one of the things we talked about was a referral to the RTM to have a discussion about our fine capacity for that. And so we're probably going to need an ordinance to focus that, to make sure we've got the right fines for the right enforcement. And we'll need to start the discussion with you guys, and we'll meet with you separately to talk about parameters for that and kind of what we were thinking. But we'll get the Great Island Committee to sort of formally communicate that request to you. But we approved doing so at Board of Selectmen last night. Now, one other point, just for everyone's clarity watching, the reason we're having the problem with the Blight Commission is that the members of the commission are sourced from other committees. So in other words, one representative needs to come from Aging, one needs to come from Human Services, one needs to come from the RTM. And on the commission itself, to Seth's point, it has to meet minority representation rules. And in this case, we need a Republican to fill the RTM slot. Currently, there's no representative from Human Services because we've had trouble staffing that committee. So it's hamstringing the Blight Commission. At some point, probably in the new year, I'm going to come to the RTM with some suggested changes to the charter. One of them being that we get away from this sort of odd structure and membership requirements for Blight and try to do something that gives us a little more flexibility so we can have an operating committee. So more to come on that.
Well, I'll alert Frank Kemp. He's head of TGS&A. He has a couple of things on his plate already that he's getting pressure on to wrap up. And I'll just tell him that there's a couple of more freight trains coming down the track. So
it's a friendly train, not to worry. Loud horns, but still friendly.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for Seth?
I have one. I'm just curious, Seth, about your opinion on this. HHR hasn't been to the RTM in a little while, and I'm assuming that at some point Board of Selectmen, maybe Board of Finance and yourselves would like to have a little update from us. We can certainly send a memo on a regular basis, but I was curious to know if you were interested in having us come to you and perhaps having us come at the State of the Town. So I don't have to solve that here necessarily today, but I wanted to put it on the table for you all to contemplate when you might want to hear from us, if at all.
Always love hearing from you.
Okay.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll just figure it out when you know.
It's an interesting idea because, I mean, I think certainly the Board of Selectmen, the building committee is chartered by this board. Board of Finance is certainly interested, and the RTM, maybe having a brief presentation and update at the State of the Town that would update everybody. Maybe that's an efficient way to do that, but up to you, Seth.
Yeah, no, we had to set, well, no, we still, I'm just looking at the calendar here. Yeah, we have the ability to be able to add that to the State of the Town. Because the Rules Committee meets the 18th of November, and we set the agenda for the State of the Town then, so we can do that.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Seth? All right, two last things before we go. One is, excuse me, we need to discuss date and time for OPC in 2025. So it turns out now that I have a standing meeting at 4 o'clock on Mondays that I can't move. And I'd like to do OPC at another time. That's why we're talking today instead of yesterday. 4 o'clock on Tuesdays. That works for me, and we'll pick which one that is. I guess it's call it the third, maybe third or fourth, let's call it the fourth Tuesday in every month. But I'd like everybody to think about it and let me know if you have an objection to that, or if not, and if you do, what would be a better time? Where I said any time on Tuesday would be fine, so it doesn't have to be even at 4 o'clock. So I know Jim, you and Steve are working, and Seth, you've got some commitments, and you do too, Jill. But give that some thought so that we can fix a time for our meetings in 2025. Okay. Last thing is we got a couple of sets of minutes to review. These are from the meetings for July 15th and September 18th. I've been through both sets and didn't have any changes. Does anybody have any edits? Okay. Could I get a motion to approve as presented both the July 15th and the September 18th minutes?
So move.
Jim moves, Lori seconds, all in favor? Okay, terrific. All our minutes are approved. Calendar will come out. I'll formally propose the fourth Tuesdays of each month at 4 o'clock. Let me know if that doesn't work, and we'll adjust it at our next meeting, but let's try to set that for our sessions in 2025. I think virtual format works fine unless there's an objection, but we certainly can keep it that way, and that works for me. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, thanks very much. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Seth moves, Jill seconds, all in favor. We're adjourned. Thanks.